Hello, this is Dr. Julie Fernandez again, and this video we will be discussing the comprehensive exam that you are scheduled to take this coming February at HBU. This is a test that is required for all students who are graduating with a master's in education, and not expected for students who are just getting their principal certification alone. So again, if you are listening to this and you're like, I'm a cert only person, then you can stop this video because you don't need to watch any more. So this is a requirement. The comprehensive exam is one of the requirements for graduation at HBU. So you should have at this point have already applied for candidacy. You had completed 18 hours of coursework and you've maintained a GPA of a 3.0 or above. Again, you must have completed a minimum of 24 hours of coursework applied to your degree. Now, for ed admin students, we only have one core course that you take that all MEDs take, and that's the research course. So the questions are based on the courses that you have already taken, not any courses you are currently taking or have not taken. So you're only being tested about what we've already worked with you. So the exam consists of 5 essay questions. And the essay questions come from the courses you have already taken. You should have taken at least 8 courses up to this time, so it's about 5 courses you'll be selected. And you will answer essay questions from each of the 5 courses. Now, and it's a 5-hour exam, so you have about an hour per question. Now, the Education Administration program is a little different. Instead of having separate questions for separate courses, we do a scenario, and then what you do is respond to the scenario, and you can take information from any of the classes that you've already taken. So we're asking you to synthesize and to apply the knowledge and the skills throughout the classes in the Education Administration program. Because it's not like we just isolate a concept or certain types of knowledge. We kind of spread everything out all the way through. So you talk about culture and climate in almost all of your classes. We go over school law in almost all the classes in one way or the other. We talk about teacher evaluation and we talk about instructional issues pretty much in every single class. So you'll notice that we just repeat ourselves over and over again or build upon those concepts. So the questions you will be asked, we'll be asking you to take all the information from all the classes that you have worked in and from your internship and apply them all to respond to the questions. Okay, so the timing of this is really important. So in the morning, you arrive probably 8. I think the test starts at 8:30. I will clarify that in a moment, but you will have 3 questions in the morning. So for EDAD students, you'll have 1 story going with data, and then you'll have 3 questions that you have to answer in the first 3 hours. Then you'll have a lunch break. You'll come back and you'll do 2 more questions. Now, there might be a completely different scenario that you will be reading from, or it might be the same one. We don't know. You'll see when you get there. The test is administered in a computer lab, or you might be in a room with laptops. We have a lot of people taking the test this February, so you'll be assigned and you'll be told where you're going to go. There will be faculty members there as proctors. You will be given a pad of paper and a pencil so that you can take notes, write down and organize your thoughts, and do an outline, whatever you need to do to prepare to respond to an set of essay questions. Now, your goal is to write about 1 to 2 pages double-spaced response for each question. So you have about an hour for each question, about 1.5 pages, 2 pages. We want detail, and we want to see that you are using the data that is provided to respond to your questions. And I'm going to repeat that probably 5 or 6 times during this video. If you are an online student only, that means every single class you take is online, or a vast majority of your classes are online. You do have the option, if you do not live in the state of Texas, or if you do not live in the Houston area, to take the exam online. You need to contact your advisor or your intern supervisor right away if that's what you're planning to do. But do understand there's a $25 fee if you take the exam online through a video proctor. Passing score. You must pass to qualify for graduation. You must pass at least 4 out of the 5 questions. If you don't pass at least 4, you're given another opportunity to take the test, and you will respond to the questions that are very similar to the one you missed. So if you did not respond correctly to a question that would have asked you to use budget information, then you would end up taking another test just about the budget situation, just so we can see whether or not you understand the concepts learned. If you take the second test, you'll end up coming to campus. It's usually on a weekday evening, and then or afternoon. And then what you'll end up doing is not typing it on a computer. You'll be given a pad of paper and you'll respond in writing. Let's say you don't pass it the second time, you will be required to retake the class. I have not seen this happen very often. It's pretty rare, and I have a lot of confidence in all of our students that you'll do a great job the first time around. So how are these graded? Well, it's not a single grader. We have 2 to 3 graders. So 2 to 3 professors read your work and score it. And so it's scored as either a novice, as competent, or proficient. So proficient means that you've gotten all of the ideas in, you were able to communicate effectively, you used data to support your answers, examples, you connected, and you had all of the answers, the responses, and the vocabulary was used correctly. Competent means most of the time you had almost everything together. It might have been some areas where you could have elaborated a little bit more, but it wasn't to the extent that we didn't understand, that you understood the knowledge and the skills of the content you're being tested on. Now, novice means that you didn't respond to the answer to the questions, you did not develop your responses, you did not use data. It just means that you didn't give us the information you need to share your knowledge of the concepts. So again, each question is graded by a first grader, and then a second grader and a third grader. Professors. It sounds like I'm saying first grade kid, second grade kid, third grade kid, but no, I'm just saying there's 3 different graders that are looking. So it's fair. I mean, if a lot of times there's only 2 graders, and then if there's a disagreement between the 2 graders, we will bring in a third to make the final call. So education administration, our program is very unique because our questions are scenario based, meaning we give you a story of something that's happened in schools. We've been doing case studies throughout every single one of your classes, throughout your whole program. I'm not sure we have a class that you don't work with some kind of case study and we talk about possible solutions. Within that case study or scenario, you'll see data. We will give you different types of formative and summative data for you to use to identify exactly what's going on and how you're going to use that data. So we may have one scenario and maybe 2 or 3 questions based on that scenario. We might have a single scenario with 1 question to go with it. It's just different for each question. But we're asking you to respond to questions that are on the application, synthesis, and evaluation level. So if you think of Bloom's taxonomy, we're going for the highest level of Bloom's. So what we're talking about is the super leader. What's the best practices of a school leader? This goes back to what we've just finished talking about for the Texas exam. We want the very best of the best. We want people to do a great job. And so we want you to express the best practices of a school leader. So you should be in that mindset by this point. So we're talking about how you're involving stakeholders. So your responses should be expressing, how do you get everybody involved? How do you use collaboration? Remember, collaboration is the goal. We want people collaborating. Data-driven, how are you using data in your response to your questions? Just like how are you using data in the response to the things that happen on your campuses? There's a big push for leaders who understand the needs of diverse populations. So how are you taking care of children that are ELL, special education, students that come from different cultures, talking about gender differences, we're talking about racial differences. How are you working with students where they are? Also, the focus again is instructional leadership. How are you being a strong instructional leader? And then finally, but I think this should have been probably first, but how you behave ethically and legally. Everything you do must be at the very highest of standards of ethical and legal behaviors of a leader. So how do you prepare for this exam? It's kind of a tricky way to prepare for this exam, but first, look at each course syllabus, and you should have kept those. I think we've all kind of stressed for you to keep some of your textbooks and review those. But look at the themes of the courses. What did we talk about? Well, again, we did case studies. You might want to review some of your case studies. You have a case studies book that from EDAD 6301. You can use that and respond to some of those questions as practice. So, and I think there's a few other textbooks that had case studies in them that you can kind of review and think about, how would I solve that problem? Review the principal standards. Again, your responses should be at that level of the standards associated with being a principal, both in the state of Texas and nationally. And finally, review vocabulary. We want you to use vocabulary appropriately. So on this Blackboard page website, we've given you vocabulary to help you practice for the Texas exam. So go ahead and review that vocabulary. You have another set of studies items that you can use. All right. So we're going to do a sample question so I can give you an idea of what this is going to feel like. So these are the directions. Read the following scenario, respond to the questions, citing data from the information given in the scenario and/or data reports. The important word here is citing data from the information given. So you need to go back and look at the data and add in why you're making a decision based on the data, and explain how you are using data in your response. So here's a sample. You and a fifth grade team are reviewing reading benchmark scores during a team meeting. The scores indicate that there is little growth in Mr. Brown's class. This class has significantly lower reading scores than the other classes. The campus goal is to show significant improvement of reading scores for economically disadvantaged students. His class has a high percentage of economically disadvantaged students that could affect the accountability rating of the whole school. So please look at the scores. So the passing rates for Miss Smith, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Jones, that's the fifth grade team. Notice Mr. Jones does not have special education children in his class. So these are the scores. This is the first set of data that you need. So if I was taking this as a comprehensive exam question, I may jot down on my pad of paper that is provided, the biggest pieces of what's happening here. What is going on? What am I noticing about this fifth grade reading benchmark scores? Ms. Smith, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Jones in comparison. Now, I'm giving you some additional data. So this is Mr. Brown's T-test post-conference, and this is his reinforcement area. So remember, reinforcement is the glow, so to speak. I'm going to give you a minute or so to read this, the evidence. Okay, so think about what you can take away. Write notes. You know, what am I seeing is going on here? But this, again, this is his reinforcement area. Now I have additional. This is his refinement area. So I'm going to give you a minute to read the refinement area evidence. So there's some interesting information here. Excuse me. So it's what happens in a classroom and what is going on with the differentiation going on in this classroom. And again, go back to the original issue that there's concerns about Mr. Brown not differentiating instruction for economically disadvantaged students. So this is going to lead us to one more piece of evidence. Here's samples of the students' poems. Now you can read that one is partially not even finished and I misspelled a word, and you know, this is just, again, this is formative data. What am I finding out about the students in his class? Now this is only 4 students who turned in their assignment, and you saw the percentage of students who actually completed the assignment. So taking this information, the information from the meeting, the benchmark scores, his reinforcement and refinement evidence, and even samples of a student's poetry, let's think about types of questions we could ask. So one question could be, what coaching questions would you ask Mr. Brown to help him reflect on his differentiated practices in his classroom? You want to support those questions with evidence from his reinforcement and his refinement. So one thing I would ask you to use to study and prepare for the test is go back and look at your T-test handbook and look at the different types of questions for different types of coaching questions that you can ask for different areas, dimensions, and from T-test. We could ask, what is the process you would use to plan Mr. Brown's growth and development to meet the needs of the economically disadvantaged students in his class? So here we're talking about professional development, growth plans. How would you do that? How would you go through that process of helping him improve? Because you cannot say, I'm going to fire Mr. Brown. That is not an option here. You can't fire him. So how are you going to help him improve? And what is that process for helping him to improve? How could you use professional learning community, a PLC, to improve the overall read scores for the whole 5th grade? So thinking again, looking at the data, what is the processes that I need to go through to help that whole team? That whole team is struggling, not just Mr. Brown. So how can I work collaboratively with that team? What other data do you and your fifth grade team need in order to plan and implement improvements for your fifth grade students in reading? Why this data? So you can talk about what data you have, what more data you need, and why would you need that data, and what would you do with that data? What are you hoping to find out from that data? Another question is, describe your instructional vision for the reading program in your school. We've had you writing your instructional visions in the past, but I want you to relate it as the principal of this school with fifth grade students who are struggling, who are economically disadvantaged. What is your vision, and how are you going to, how are you going to attain that vision? And how would you involve the fifth grade parents in supporting their children in reading? So again, then we're talking about community, communication, we're talking about collaboration. How are you going to do that? And again, going back to the data. So these are possible questions that we would ask for you to write about during your comprehensive exams. And notice it goes across the board. This could be from pretty much any of the classes that you have taken up to this point. Because again, we go over all these different types of processes in our classes. We may ask you questions, or scenarios might be about the budget process. If you have already completed your finance class, we'll talk about that budget process. Legal and ethical decision making, that's pretty much across the board, but mostly in law. Special education law, especially procedural safeguards, parental involvement, communication, teacher appraisal process, T-test. Everybody has taken T-tests, so that is now open game for us to test you about. Different types of supervision for those who have taken the instructional leadership course. Teacher retention, that's instructional leadership, and that's also in the HR course. AEL, themes and strands. Culture and climate, that's in everything. Professional development, that's in everything. Student discipline, that's a little more in legal, but know the rules. Shared decision making, that's almost in every single class. Site-based decision making committees, we've talked about that on almost every single class. Addressing the needs of ELL, or at-risk students or at-risk students. Reading a TAPER report, we've probably strongly say that there will be a TAPER report that you may have to interpret. Creation of campus improvement plans. We have done that in a lot of classes. Data analysis from that data class that you took. Use of action research. Thinking of your research class that you took that everybody was required to take. Thinking about that research class. How can you apply the concepts of research in your school? And of course, RTI is always embedded somewhere in our leadership processes. And I'm talking about how RTI is supposed to be done, not how it's always done at your school. Again, going back to site-based decision-making committees, how it's supposed to be done based on the state rules, not on maybe how your campus is doing it. Remember to defend all your responses by citing data that is provided. So we're thinking about the demographics. Think about student achievement, both summative and formative assessments. Thinking about the perceptions of culture and climate, procedures and processes data. How well are people, coming to school? Are your rules working? So those are, I want you to use whatever data we give you to respond to the questions. Remember APIE? I think I've gone over this so many times, but let's think about that in your process too, and your problem solving in your essays that you write. Go through the APIE process, assess using the data, plan the intervention or change that you want to do, implement the plan, and evaluate the implementation of the plan by using data. So if you think of that process, that's really going to help you organize your paper. Think about that as 4 paragraphs and a conclusion, and you've got your comprehensive question response. So that's the end of this video. If you have more questions, you can contact your advisor or your internship supervisor. If you have not registered for the test, or that you are going to miss the test, or that you need special accommodations for the test, please contact Christy Wright, and there's her email address, and she will help you out. Your next assignment now is to respond, create a study plan, and that's what you're going to turn in for your assignment after you've watched this video. Again, if you have any questions, please contact your internship supervisor, and they will help you respond to your questions that you have or your study plan. It's been my pleasure to work with you today, so I have blessings on you and on taking this test, and I am fully confident all of you will be successful. God bless.